Welcome to Bluegrass Brooklyn, our podcast all about the music we love, straight from the bluegrass borough of Brooklyn, New York. Season 5, Episode 10. Thanks for joining. I'm your host, Mike Wilner. Liz Wolfe, our co-host, has the week off. Today, we get to speak with Andy Leftwich, a truly iconic American fiddler, multi-instrumentalist, recording artist, performing artist. I think you're really going to enjoy the conversation, which covers his musical vision, his approach, his musical priorities, projects coming up. We even talk about the shellac shortage during World War II. So I really hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. I'd like to encourage you to check out Porch Stomp. This is an organization that supports music here in New York and the region, puts on a great festival in June, which we'll be hearing more about. But maybe more importantly, if you go to porchstomp.com, you can subscribe to a weekly email which lists all says a lot of the jams, concerts, events, gigs, what people in the community here in New York City and the region are up to. So if you're visiting or live here, really worth checking out Porch Stomp and getting on that email list. Also, of course, if you are looking for jams in Uptown Manhattan, Bronx, Riverdale, New Jersey, and across the country, go have a look at bluegrassjamsnearme.com. Please remember to follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn, Brooklyn spelled BKLYN. It really helps if you like and subscribe to the podcast and tell your friends. Let's get to the interview. Okay, so here we are with Andy Leftwich, multi-instrumentalist, recording artist, multiple Grammy winner. I could go on, but first, Andy, thanks for joining us.
Well, Mike, it's great to be with you. Thank you so much for having me.
So one thing I wanted to ask, you're a multi-instrumentalist. You play fiddle, mandolin, guitar as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's correct. Yes,
So
sir.
what do you consider yourself? A guitar player, a fiddle player? How do you think about that?
No, sir, I consider myself a fiddle player. You know, I started playing fiddle when I was 6 years old. And I grew up playing in competitions, fiddle contests around the southern region. They would also have a mandolin contest, a guitar contest, banjo, dobro. And so I wanted to learn and enter as many contests as I could. And when I learned that the mandolin was the same left hand as the fiddle,
Yes.
That's when I picked up the mandolin. And so the guitar came a few years later, but the fiddle and mandolin are my two main instruments for sure.
Yeah, I have a question about that. I speak to a lot of top-tier fiddle players, and a lot of them have gone through that competition circuit. Do you think the value in musical development outweighs what I imagine must be like the pressure and anxiety, et cetera, that comes along with a kid going into those kinds of competitions?
I think it would depend on the kid. I have a lot of parents ask me all the time, should I enter my kids in competition? When you're a kid, I think competition motivates you to want to be better. It certainly was the case for me. I would see other players my own age that were far more advanced and would know different tunes. It inspired me to want to ask them, how'd you learn this song? And where'd you learn it from? And I would go back home and I'd buy that record they told me about, and I would learn it and prepare for the next contest. And my grandparents were great to take me around to a competition every single weekend out of the summer in the southern states. However, I always caution parents that may have a child starting to play, at some point they do need to move away from it because music is not a contest.
Right.
And you want to be able to play and perform your best, but you also want to learn how to play with other players. And so I think they're great when you're starting out. It'll push you and motivate you to get better. You'll meet a lot of great players. But at some point, you want to gravitate toward playing in bands and different jams at festivals you go to and just try to learn from anybody and everybody you meet.
So when did you make that transition from playing in competitions to focusing on group play?
So I was 15 when a lady named Valerie Smith, who had just started her bluegrass career, she had hired me to play fiddle in her band. I was still in high school and trying to do high school work on the road is not very easy. Every weekend we had a show, or at least every other weekend we had a show. So that took me out of the realm of contest fiddling. you go from hoping you might win some prize money to a guaranteed paycheck with a professional bluegrass group. So it was a no-brainer for me. It was time for me to move on from that. So I was 15 years old when that took place. I don't know of a good recommendation of an age of when you need to move away from that, because I have some friends, are adults well into their 30s, that still like to do competitions because it's fun for them, and they don't play music professionally, but it keeps their chops up and keeps them motivated. So I think that's great.
A friend of the show, a guy named Glenn Alexander, who runs the violin shop in Charlotte, North Carolina, he's regularly placed in the top 10, I think the top 4 in Galax. And he says he doesn't even worry about it too much anymore because the kids coming out of the conservatory are so prepared when they go into these competitions, and they're so polished, it's almost impossible to really compete against them. But he does it for fun. I guess it's the temperament of the individual kid. So I take it you have students and you teach?
Well, I don't on a regular basis. There's a couple of times throughout the year I might sit with a few students. There's a couple of churches I visit throughout the year that we'll teach at for a few days, but I don't consider myself a teacher. There's people who are great at it, and I've never considered myself a very good teacher. But anybody that, if I can spend some time with them, I certainly will. I'm just not able to devote the time that any student really needs. My recommendation is to go to somebody once a week, or at least once every 2 weeks, and have some sort of curriculum, a book to go by, something to learn, and different exercises that you can practice along with those songs.
Here's a point I would like to drill down on a little bit. There seems to me a distinction between learning technique, let's talk about the fiddle, holding the bow, positioning the left hand, positioning the instrument, and learning a genre, learning the language of Irish or bluegrass or Cajun fiddling. What do you think, how do you feel about, on one extreme, a teacher who says, just learn tunes and learn from the tunes, and someone who's going to say, oh, do these scale exercises, do these dexterity exercises, etc. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think you need both. What I try to teach when I do have a chance is to teach a song, but put an exercise with it. A great illustration would be the song, the fiddle tune Liberty, which I recorded on the American Fiddler record. That was a tune I started out in my very early days and competed with that song. And it's such a great tune to teach the arpeggio scale for the key of D, G, and A. And so I would, when I do teach that fiddle tune, I have them practice an arpeggio to go along with that song. And I'll make it fun. We'll do it frontwards, backwards, skip every note, just do something like that. But I think it's important for anybody playing the fiddle starting out to yes, learn a fiddle tune, but also have an exercise to go along with that fiddle tune. Another great example would be the song Blackberry Blossom. That melody has a really interesting scale that you go up 3 notes and then you back to the 1, and then you go up 3 more notes back to the 1, or vice versa. You go the opposite way. And so there's a great way to practice your scales that will match that melody. And so exercises, I'm huge on exercises. I grew up playing music, but also grew up playing sports. I loved baseball, basketball, tennis, and now I'm a big golfer. And so there's so many drills and exercises that a coach will tell you to do, and I just apply that to music. It's the same way. You've got to put in the grunt work to really see results out of your playing.
So talk about expensive, time-consuming hobbies, golf, huh? How's that going?
Yeah, it's more of an addiction than it is a hobby, but I love it.
Well, I see a similarity between golf and playing fiddle. It's sort of like golf. There's that one day where every shot goes where you want it to. And for some reason, that makes you think that the next day is going to be like that.
Exactly.
And it's the same thing with fiddle. You're in tune. Everything's hitting. Sounds great. It's like, oh, finally, I've reached a new level. And the next day, it sounds like crap. Anyway.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So genre-wise, we spoke with Daryl Anger, and he won't say he's a particular genre of fiddle.
Oh my goodness, I love Daryl. He's such an innovator and pushes the boundaries of what you can do on the fiddle and the style in which we call it a fiddle. Like a classical player that grew up playing in string music, they wouldn't call it a fiddle, they'd call it a violin. But guys that grew up playing bluegrass, folk, Irish music, Americana music, they would call it a fiddle. And so Daryl is one of those guys that, you can't pin him down on one specific style. He's just his own player. I met him when I was 13 years old at the Mark O'Connor Fiddle Camp and was just absolutely blown away by what he could do with the fiddle. Never heard anybody like him since.
Yeah, he's an incredible player, but the fact that he's transcended genre really
Yes.
makes him stand out. But we do play in a genre. Like often we're playing bluegrass tunes or old time tunes. What's your approach to learning or expressing a genre through your playing and making sure when someone hears it, they say, ah, that's bluegrass fiddle versus, oh, that's Cape Breton fiddle or something like that?
It's so interesting. You had mentioned earlier about different languages
Yeah.
that the fiddle can play. And I love that illustration because I look at the language of English, and we speak English here in America. They speak English in Canada and Europe,
Yeah.
but it's just with a different dialect. And so that's kind of what I look at a fiddler who plays Cape Breton versus bluegrass versus Irish music. It's the same tunes, but just a little bit different with the grace notes and phrasings. The same shape of song, but I love the approach that you find in different parts of the country, even in America. Down in Texas, the Texas swing players, they'll play with their thumb underneath the frog and not necessarily underneath the stick. And you notice that they have a beautiful right arm, but you don't see them playing very much from the middle of the bow up to the frog. It's usually from the middle of the bow down to the tip.
Mm-hmm.
And those Texas swing players are great at that. Whereas you may go up in your part of the world and you'll see players that have a little bit more technique with their playing. And so, but it might not be as swingy of a style. It'd be a little bit
Right.
more folk. And I can almost tell where a player's from just by watching their bow arm.
Interesting.
And a lot of Cape Breton style players, they might hold the right hand. They may hold it more on the stick as opposed to the frog of the bow. And it's just really neat to see how different cultures and players were playing the same fiddle tune, but in a different dialect. And I love that.
Yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. We had Andy Statman on the show, and he said, go deep, go complete, and go to the root on a genre first. Just keep going, focus. And once you completely learned a genre,
Yeah.
then you can think about learning others. Where I've had other people say, spread yourself out. Hear as many different voices and dialects as you possibly can. Learn as much about all of them as you can, and your ability to play in genres will emerge. Do you have an opinion?
Absolutely. I agree with Andy. I think, and obviously this all depends on how much time you're willing to dedicate to your craft. But if you're young and starting out, I think it's important to understand why it is we're playing the fiddle tune or whatever piece of music that we're playing. When I first met Ricky Skaggs and started playing in his band, I could play anything. I mean, anything thrown at me, I could do a solo on.
Mm-hmm.
But what I could not do is think like those fathers of bluegrass fiddle. I couldn't think like Paul Warren. I couldn't think like
Right.
Chubby Wise or Benny Martin. Those guys wrote the vocabulary of the bluegrass licks and phrases that we play. And if you were to ask me to play a more traditional solo, I wouldn't be able to do that.
Right.
Now, I could go back and listen and I could hear it and I could pick it up pretty quickly, but I wouldn't be able to think like those guys. What I did is for 3 solid months, I asked Ricky, I said, hey, give me some of your records that you really loved, grew up on, and really admired. And there was a handful of Flat Scruggs and Ralph Stanley CDs and Bill Monroe CDs. And I engulfed it. I put it in my car, put it in my house. Every time I listened to music, it was those 3 entities of music. I never listened to anything else for at least 3 months. And I learned not only the licks, but I actually listened for the bow strokes. I wanted to make sure that my bow strokes were correct. And I wasn't perfect with it, but I got really close. And then we cut that record with Ricky and Kentucky Thunder called Honoring the Fathers, ended up winning a Grammy on it. Cool. And it was, to this day, I mean, I look back on those records and I think I'm thankful that I went through that time period in my career to where I really got to the root of bluegrass fiddle, because it is different than contest fiddling.
Yep.
And I just so admired those guys and what they pioneered back in the day. It was incredible music.
Yeah, you mentioned like 3 of my favorite fiddlers. So, and if you throw Kenny Baker in there, you kind of got it covered. Although, yeah, I listened to your album the other day, and we'll get a chance to talk about that. But before that, I'm going to put you on the spot for the first time. At Mount Rushmore is the 4 iconic individuals and that had tremendous impact on our nation's history. So I'm going to ask you for your Mount Rushmore of fiddle players. Doesn't have to be the best, most famous, but the ones you feel had the most impact on you or fiddle playing in general. But you only get 4.
Oh goodness, what a hard question.
That's right.
Yeah, if the criteria is what has meant the most to me personally, not just the genre of music, but me personally, I would
Yeah.
have to give you some of the newer guys like Mark O'Connor, Stuart Duncan, Bobby Hicks, and probably Alison Krauss. She was a huge influence on me growing up, and Alison comes from those contest days, and so those four for sure. But I mean, goodness, I could keep going.
Of course. Almost everybody we talk to puts Stewart on their list. We got a chance to meet him and sit in some workshops with him at a recent event, and it was quite incredible. I'm a big believer in go see. It's great to listen to someone, but sitting and watching and just getting in the presence of it's a big deal. And luckily, we have things like YouTube. Probably the most inspirational player just to watch was Kenny Baker.
That's great. Yeah, Mike. What you see can really inspire you. Benny Martin had the most incredible approach to fiddling, and Stewart credits a lot of his playing to Benny Martin. He just thought differently, but if you were to see him, I mean, it would just help you put two and two together and sort of begin to think like he thought. And so it's hard sometimes when you're just listening to old recordings to
Right.
really grasp what those guys were really doing. So, yeah, I would recommend anybody going out there and go see your favorite players and don't just listen to them, but go see them.
So,
Yeah.
thanks for that. I'm always fascinated, and I see you have a nice balance. Also, you put a woman on your list, which kind of represents the increasing presence of women in bluegrass music and in general. But
Yeah.
I'll say there are a lot of incredible fiddle players, but I'd have to put at least, if I did the Mount Rushmore, I'd have to put at least one, if not two.
Yeah.
Maddie Denton would have to be on there.
Oh, goodness.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So,
Yeah, she's amazing.
okay, so I want to shift a little bit to your music. You compose as well as cover and perform, right?
Most of the tunes are compositions of mine, and I think they were, with the exception of two or three, I believe.
What formal training versus, let's call it on-the-job training or experience training? How does that balance in your composition experience and career?
Well, all the songs that I compose are direct inspirations from just the musicians I've had a chance to play with and the experiences that I've had and listening to some of my favorite records. The American Fiddler project, that song, The American Fiddler, was a direct inspiration from Ricky Skaggs. And it reminded me of a song. When the melody came to me, I was writing it and trying to develop it. And the more it developed, I was like, man, this reminds me of something Ricky would have written. And so I had to have Ricky play mandolin on the cut. And so we had a great time with that. But so there's certain songs that come to me, a different idea that'll come to me, and I'll think of another musician. This song called Old Hickory that's on the new record, I actually wrote it on the guitar, and I thought of Cody Kilby as soon as I thought, man, this might be a fun one that I could show Cody. And if he's up for it, and of course he was. And Cody's a great friend and great musician and was my bandmate in Ricky's band for so long. And so I heard Cody playing this song when I originally wrote it. I had to change a few phrases to make it match a little bit better on the fiddle, but I was honored that Cody learned it and played it. And so occasionally I'll write a song thinking about a musician, but most of the time it just comes out from different players you may have played with, different shows you may have done. You just never know when inspiration hits, and you just sort of have to be ready. And so thank God for the iPhone and for voice memos, because I've got about 300 ideas on my voice memos that you can quickly put down. Some of the old guys, they'll tell you, well, if you can't remember it, it's not worth remembering. And I don't buy into that at all. I think you need to write down and record as many ideas as you can. And then later on, you might have a chance to develop it. So,
Now, any formal training in terms of composition?
No, sir, not really. When I was a kid, I just took from a couple of fiddlers that would teach me some fiddle tunes. But there is a fellow named Craig Duncan who lives in Nashville, and I studied with him for about 4 years, from about 11 to 15. He gave me a foundation that I could build on, and I'm so grateful and thankful for Craig. And he was a great teacher. I guess if there was a formal teacher, he would have been it. And he taught me how to read a little bit of notation. I'm still not great at it, but I can always hear it a lot easier than I can actually look at it. And so Craig was great in that. Taught me some awesome arrangements to fiddle and had the classical element that I think was helpful for my posture and my technique. And so I'm thankful for Craig.
Let me ask you a different question. I've observed among a lot of bluegrass and folk musicians not just a lack of understanding, but an aversion or resistance to learning music theory beyond 145.
Well, being a fiddle is not really a rhythm instrument. It can be a rhythm instrument. Daryl Langer is great at presenting the fiddle as a rhythm instrument, but it's so melodically driven that I would recommend a fiddler learn the scales and concentrate on learning your notes on the fingerboard.
Mhm.
I do believe having good theory and knowing what you're doing is important. But if you try to teach that before teaching fiddle tunes, I think you kind of get the cart before the horse. And I think that it just comes as you learn fiddle tunes. And I would rather somebody be able to play Angeline the Baker than to be able to explain to me what 1, 3, and 5 are, or 1, 4, and 5 and a 6 minor and all that. I'd rather see them get some good fiddle tunes under their fingers, and chord theory will eventually catch up.
I have to admit, I was mystified. I mean, I played music most of my life, but mostly melodic woodwinds and mostly in orchestral settings. So
Oh, wow.
chords are like, who cares? Who knows?
Right.
I'm just playing what's written there.
Right.
And the whole idea of the little Roman numerals totally mystified me until I sat in the bluegrass jam and I got like, oh, G, C, D, 1, 4, 5.
I think if you train your ear first, it makes chord theory and learning all those other, what seems difficult now, I think it makes sense as you train your ear to music.
I find that, for example, find the seventh so that I can quickly know where the seventh of all the main notes are, and especially
Yeah.
if you're playing some Western swing, where the sixth of everything is, and that's what drove my understanding of theory, is how I need it to sound. I'm going to shift topics again a little bit. So, Second World War, there was a shellac shortage, so that to really curtail what albums would be published. A lot of music didn't get pressed because they didn't have the shellac to do it, believe it or not. So now
Wow.
I'm going to have a modern shellac shortage and tell you, Andy, I'm sorry, but you can only press 2 tunes in your next album. Which 2 tunes would those be?
Oh, goodness. So I always try to record music that means something to me. For me, one of my favorite pieces of music, and I think the most beautiful piece of music ever written, was by John Sebastian Bach, the Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring.
Yes.
And so I worked that up on the mandolin, and I play that in my shows, and it's just such a gorgeous piece of music that you typically hear at weddings. But the way Bach thought about music and the way he used arpeggios in music is just a beautiful thing. So that would definitely be one of them.
Yeah, that's an incredible piece of music. Why don't we listen to a little bit? Wow. Okay. That's one. We have enough shellac for one more recording, Andy.
Well, does it have to be something that I haven't recorded yet?
No, whatever you choose.
Yeah. Well, one of the thrills of a lifetime for me was getting to play Sally Gooden with Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder.
Yeah.
And we started playing that song one summer, and it just grew and grew and felt better and better every night. And I don't think you can call yourself a fiddler without knowing the Sally Gooden. So we recorded this on the road, and the crowd was just so into it that night. So we had to keep it for the American Fiddler project. So the Sally Gooden with Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder live on the American Fiddler project would be my number 2.
Well, first, now I have to learn Sally Gooden. And second, why don't we listen to some of that?
Here's Andy Leftwich. All right.
right. Amazing. Well, thank you for indulging me on that question. Let's talk a little bit about the American Fiddler project. First of all, what was the driving vision or motivation?
Yeah, so it kind of grew as I was collecting the songs that I had composed for this project. It hit me that this is just a direct result of all the fiddling music that I grew up listening to that you would call the fiddle in that genre. So bluegrass, obviously, folk music, Irish music, swing music, a little bit of Cajun music, any genre of music that you would name it the fiddle versus the violin. All of those genres of music inspired the songs that I had composed for the American Fiddler project. And as I was writing the song, The American Fiddler, the title cut, believe it or not, I actually wrote it in the idea that I could present this to an orchestra or to somebody that grew up playing string music, where they could learn the different phrases and the embellishments of the tune. And if they did so, they would be playing fiddle and didn't know it. And it was actually during COVID when I wrote the song. And originally I thought this project would be something I could present to an orchestra and have some string arrangements, and we could do some really fun things with that. But I didn't. When COVID happened, it sort of changed everybody's world, and it changed my approach to it. And then the wonderful folks at the Mountain Home Music reached out to me, and so we decided to team up and release this project as a bluegrass project. And so really, honestly, it's just a direct inspiration from those tunes and different genres of music that I listened to growing up. So that's kind of where the title, The American Fiddler, came from.
Very cool.
So the American Fiddler was released in 2024, and we've been working hard at another release coming up in April as sort of the debut of that record.
Very good. So that was a monumental piece of work. What else have you got going on? Anything coming out or any other recordings?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we're excited about the release of the new project called Aced. And it's going to be released in April 17th, I believe, is the release date. So we're really excited about that. The thing that's a little bit different with this project than American Fiddler is that I have the same 4 guys on every cut. And so there's a very nice, cohesive, from top to bottom feel to this record. Again, it's songs that I've composed, with the exception with about 2 or 3 covers that we've done. But the thing I wanted to get across with this new record is that bluegrass is one of those rare forms of music that really celebrate the player just as much as the artist or the singer that they back up. And so I wanted to use some of the best musicians and friends that I could find. And obviously, my good friend Cody Kilby on the acoustic guitar joins me on this record. Matt Menifee joins me on banjo. Matt's an incredible melodic style banjo player. And then the legendary bassist Byron House plays bass on the project. As I was recording this project, we had written a song, and I named the song Aced. And so it just sort of took on a whole new meaning when I was in their studio with these guys. I'm like, man, these guys are complete aces at their craft. And so I wanted to present these musicians on all these songs. And it was important to me that the songs that we recorded, that I wrote, were fun for them and challenging for them just as much as it was for me. And so I was honored that they would record with me. And so they are true aces at their craft. And so I figured the title of the record should be called Aced.
Yeah, bluegrass is really players' music. It really is.
Yeah.
One last question before we let you go. Do you get much into jamming or the jam culture? Do you have time for that?
Well, I love it. I don't necessarily have a whole lot of time for it. Most of the time, when I was with Ricky, if we did bluegrass festivals, maybe if we spent the night at a bluegrass festival, I'd always try to find a jam. Just like anything, as you get really busy, some things sort of fall by the wayside. And unfortunately, I don't find myself in many jams anymore, but I certainly love it. I love getting around players and trying my best to learn from anybody that I come across, for sure.
Song most likely to be called by you in a jam?
Man, I love the Temperance Reel. That's such a fun tune.
Huh.
I love tunes that are played in 2 different keys. Most fiddle tunes, you have an A part and a B part. I love tunes like Temperance Reel or Forked Deer. Forked Deer is in 2 different keys. It's the old joke because there's only really 2 fiddle tunes in the entire world. One's in the key of D and one's in the key of A.
Right.
But I love fiddle tunes that have different chord changes. You go to different keys.
Very cool. Okay. So, Andy, I want to thank you for taking time with us today. Before we go, if our listeners are interested in finding out more about you and your music, do you have an online presence?
I do. Thank you for asking. It's andyleftwich.com. And folks can reach out to me there and keep up with news, different dates where we're going to be playing. And I toggle between playing dates on my own. And I just did a show with Ricky Skaggs and also with Daly and Vincent, been playing with those guys some, and that's been a lot of fun. So occasionally I'll go out with those guys, but for the most part, it's staying home and recording and getting under headphones and microphones. And so that's what keeps me busy throughout the middle of the week. But if folks want to keep up with me, they can go to andyleftwich.com, or they can follow us on all the social media, Facebook and Instagram at Andy Leftwich.
All right. Fantastic. So again, thanks so much for taking time. Fascinating conversation.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so inspired by this conversation with Andy, and I really love that we got to talk about all kinds of aspects of his playing, his recording, his musical experience. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more from him, and hopefully, if he's up here in the New York area, seeing him here. That's it for now, so please remember to follow us at Bluegrass Brooklyn, Brooklyn spelled BKLYN. And if you'd like to drop an email to us with suggestions, comments, requests, or just to say hi, please send that to mike@bluegrassbrooklyn.com. And until then, we look forward to seeing you around the jam circle.